Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune covers the Bears and spent Thursday at Halas Hall. After a week, the Bears returned from the bye with the Lions at Soldier Field Sunday on the lakefront. A lot of conversation, Dan. Thursday afternoon, Luke Getsy, offensive coordinator, first time he had spoken since the Bears' victory over the Vikings when the passing game was more horizontal than vertical. Let's start there because we'll get into Justin Fields' future and all he had to say. We'll get into Matt Eberflus and his perspective on the week and even finish up your thoughts on Kevin Warren. But let's start with Luke Getsy because a lot of people had a strong reaction to how he explained why the Bears threw 21 passes at or behind the line of scrimmage in a victory over the Vikings.
Okay, so first and foremost, I am not familiar with the reaction, which you're going to have to kind of update me on in a minute. I thought that Luke took the topic head on, explained some of what we already knew about the Bears trying to combat the pressure, blitz, pressure more, blitz more style of Brian Flores, with an extension of the running game being what he called RPO-ish looks for Justin Fields, which he said, I think he said roughly half of the screens to the perimeter were situations where Justin is trusted to count basically pre-snap and look at the numbers and figure out if the Bears can outflank the Vikings on the outside and get something going there. I talked to you previously about the reaction of Justin and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet coming out of that game against the Vikings and understanding that something had to be done in the chess match to try to loosen things up and to do some things. And that's where they leaned. And obviously I think we've established by this point that we wish there were some more downfield passes and some things to threaten the Vikings vertically. Matt has repeatedly 11 days that he was hopeful to get more explosives and that there were opportunities that they missed. And so I think there's nuance to the conversation. It's really easy to get the pitchforks out and chase the offensive coordinator down the block. And I guess based on your introduction, maybe that's what some of the folks in the public forum have done.
Well, I think there are probably two levels of reaction. One is the visceral, and people, the offensive coordinator is the easiest target in Chicago in most years, in most Bears seasons. I guess my reaction was that while I understand and appreciate his explanation, I felt like I tend to hear two themes come through when I hear Luke Getsy explain game plans after wins or losses. He is very candid about where the responsibility lies, but I tend to hear two things that are probably unfair reactions, but these are what I heard on Thursday. Not me, and I can be outcoached. So, and I'll explain that in a second. He was very open about the 21 of the 21 passes, about half of them, he explained somehow Justin was making the read and he had the decision and the autonomy to make the changes. And that's how they ended up being horizontal. And I think you called them extraordinarily horizontal passes other than passing game. And I thought that puts the onus on the quarterback rather than, the game plan. There's that autonomy. And the secondary part of what my reaction was that essentially what he's acknowledging is that the Vikings came up with a method to get the Bears to change the play to something that was going to be non-threatening. And that's coaching and that's schematic, wizardry. And that's the chess game, because whatever the Vikings were doing to get the quarterback to check the play so it wasn't a threat down the field worked. So I understand the logic and how he explained it and what he's trying to tell us why it happened. But I still think you're left with why are there's so many ways to make this Bear defense even more pedestrian than it is.
The Bear offense. I think
the Bear offense.
Luke did say that like he was very complimentary of Justin's ability to recognize. He said, I think maybe only one or two instances where Justin conceivably saw something that wasn't there and checked to a play that he didn't need to do with the perimeter screens there. I've kind of been consistent on this since the morning after the game. This is a one-time game plan in a lot of ways against an opponent that is very unique in terms of what they do and the style that they're playing. Kevin Seifert of ESPN had written a piece recently about how Brian Flores has kind of uncorked some things this season that he's never used before in his football career and has turned some things loose that other teams have to react to. the Bears didn't have a good offensive game, and so certainly that falls on the coordinator, it falls on the quarterback, it falls on everyone. They were able to steal a win out of it, which helps the feelings be better. But we're going to fast forward to Sunday really quickly, and they're going to face a Lions team that allows them to do different things, and they're going to have an entirely different style of play. They're going to have an entirely different approach to how they unlock some things, and I think that they're eager to push the ball vertically more and do some things in that regard. Look, like we talked the other day about how Justin has now had 3 consecutive 100 rushing yard outings against the Lions, which tells you that there's avenues there for him as both a scrambler and a designed runner to threaten them. And then that opens up the possibility for play action stuff, and you're able to kind of get multiple and diverse really quickly. And so I think there's this conversation is going to be very different after this week. I get it. I get the reaction. I'm still of the camp of, it is what it is, and they've got to be better in certain areas. But I think some of the outrage has been exaggerated and probably unfair.
Yeah, I don't think I would describe what I feel as outrage. I
Not,
don't.
no, not you, not you. I'm talking about the public
Yeah,
forum and like the
perhaps.
stuff you see.
Yeah,
For weeks now, it's been fire Luke into the sun. On
sure.
social media and callers to the score and everywhere else. And I think sometimes you just got to take a deep breath and see it from the inside a little bit to understand it, and then react from there.
I think it's pretty obvious to me that the more he talks and the more we hear from him, though, the questions about the relationship that I raised probably a month or so ago about just how much in sync these two guys really are, and I'm not even going back to when Justin Fields complained about being too robotic. It does not seem like it's a match made in football heaven. It does not seem like they are that compatible in terms of moving forward, because there does seem to be a semi-regular disconnect. And I don't know how. I think it's a product of having a losing season in a maybe a losing organization. But I do think that it's difficult to see or find that kind of connection between play caller and quarterback that you ideally would like to see, because that too often, or maybe not too often, but so often, I'm left with kind of reading between the lines of what Getsy is saying, and more times than not, it's about quarterback execution. And while that might be accurate, and we appreciate that, it is somewhat unusual to have a quarterback or quarterback's coach or a play caller be that open about whose responsibility it is for things not necessarily working.
I like that's the part of the conversation that like for me it's refreshing, it's illuminating, it's become an education in certain parts of how the machinery works, again, everybody's accountable for it. But I've always bristled at the idea that head coaches in this macho sport feel um, guarded against telling you when players screw up. Because if you're willing to tell your players in a team meeting, like, hey, this is where you screwed up, and this is where you're deficient, and this is where we've got to get better individually and together, then there's should be no harm in telling that to the public. This isn't youth sports. This isn't my 10-year-old baseball team. That's if that's what happened, then that's what happened, and you both have a chance every week to have your say in the matter and go that route. On a bigger picture item here, I think like you and I both sit here in the first week of December and we say that there is less than a 2% chance that both of these guys, Justin Fields and Luke Getsy, will be together in 2024. And,
Right.
and if you agree with that, then it's like, okay, then we're just kind of pedaling the bike until we get to,
Right.
to the next
No,
stage of the Tour de France.
that's a good point. And this is hardly the Tour de France. The scenery is not as beautiful. All right, so let's get to Justin Fields, because his future was broached by him on Wednesday at House Hall in a series of questions and really introspective answers that I thought revealed quite a bit. And he may have gone as deep as he has in a lot of ways. And Dan, I thought he was, he sounded like a guy who benefited from the time off. And there's some things that we'll get into more in terms of specifics of what he said, because I think it's worth people hearing.
He expressed similar sentiments in October, but in a more defeated sense. But when the Bears were getting steamrolled and they were 0-4 and everything was kind of caving in around them, I think when he was asked this week by Herb Howard first and with some follow-up questions about just kind of insulating himself from the outside noise about his future and the questions that we talk about twice, 3 times a week on this podcast about where his future lies, what everybody in the outside world is talking about all the time. He offered a very mature and grounded perspective, a faith-based perspective that he has confidence and faith that things will work out okay for him, because for the most part they always have, even when he's wanted one thing and it's turned into something else, a la Georgia turning into a transfer to Ohio State. Sometimes it works out for the best for him. I will say this, like, we've established this many times before in our discussions, that Justin's maturity, his approach, his unselfishness, his thick skin, all of those things are character qualities that I would sign up for and pay a heavy subscription for, to give to myself, to give to my family members, to give to anyone around me, because he is very admirable in that sense. And he's very mature for his age, and he's very calm in the moment of what he's faced with. And that's to be admired. Now, the other part of that is, like, ultimately you have to excel as a quarterback on the football field for the other stuff to mean more, but it certainly means something. And I think we got another taste of that on Wednesday afternoon.
I don't know. I think I have a different mindset in terms of that. Personal momentum. I'm really just trying to be consistent. I think that's the biggest thing. You can play good one game, play bad the other. So I think me personally just trying to be consistent and trying to be better than I was yesterday. So just trying to continually improve, get better as a person and a player, and just better myself each and every day.
So, David, that was the answer that was between kind of the more deeper reflective stuff that Justin gave, but that was also an indicator that Justin understands in this last month plus of the season that he's got a job to do. And the job revolves around that word that we've talked about for months now. It's consistency. It's showing people that you can be that playmaker on a regular basis to the point where you're ultra reliable when the game's on the line.
What do you think the reaction was in the room when he answered Herb Howard's question about what he's dealing with in terms of the outside noise? And Justin's answer mentioned God 3 or 4 times, leaned on his faith probably more than he has in the past. He's mentioned it before, but it was obviously more pronounced this time. And I think I respect a 24, 25-year-old young man who's in the midst of all of he's in the midst of, and being as public about how he's trying to cope with all that he's dealing with. So I don't have a big problem with it. I really never have. Some people bristle at that, and they think it might be too big of a crutch, and he's using God as a shield at times. And let's hope that doesn't that is not what I think. That's the worst of the criticisms when you hear athletes go
Yeah.
into this area. But like, what did people react to? And did you hear him, in your view, go deeper than he has in the past?
Well, I think the reaction in the room, for starters, David, was appreciative, because like, there is an admiration for Justin's willingness to engage. It's not all the time, but it's consistent enough to feel good about the back and forth in there. And Mark Grody had followed up with a question about, like, because of all the noise that has circulated this year, have you had to find a point in time where you have had to lean into that faith more, because you need that in moments of turbulence and stress? And Justin said, look, like, y'all have been at this since since I got here, and talking about the media and the fans and people that have been critical of him, right? I guess is the best way to put it. And so there's an appreciation, I think, for his ability to handle that. I always appreciated that about Mitch as well. Justin said something similar the other day about not taking anything personally. Great starting point. Great starting point for a franchise quarterback to develop that thick skin and not take things personally. And Justin's been terrific at that. I don't have a problem with the faith stuff. I mean, that's a personal preference on how much to share, whether to share it. And I didn't think it was over the top. And it's to me, it's not like that's an every week occurrence where you're never getting anything more than that. And so I didn't really think twice about it when we got up and walked out of that room.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth amplifying, only because it does reveal, I think, some maturity and strong character. Nothing about Justin Fields off the field has really ever been a concern. It's always been on the field with the mechanics and the consistency and the things and the boxes he has yet to check. And that brings us to what Kurt Warner earlier on 670 Score this week discussed, because I really feel like this, Dan. And when I look at Justin Fields, and it's interesting to hear some of these quarterback gurus weigh in on a regular basis because
Right.
I'm not a quarterback guru. We're not coaches, but I think that there's certain things that stand out. Justin Fields' footwork can be sloppy. He doesn't have the ball, in my view, where he's always ready to throw it. He does hold on to it too long. A lot of these things might be related. But when experts, Hall of Fame quarterbacks see similar things, then you start to wonder if they are problems that can be fixed or they're going to be chronic problems throughout his career.
So as we get into some Kurt Warner's sentiments, I think this is notable in a couple of regards because we've talked previously on the podcast about how glowing that Chase Daniel has been in his reviews of Justin Fields, and I probably send you 2-3 texts a week of other quarterbacks that Chase Daniel is extremely glowing about, and we're still waiting for Chase to have a highly critical session with one of the quarterbacks he analyzes. Kurt, I think, is more along the lines of that real talk, where you get both sides of it. You get the praise and then you get the criticism when it's warranted. And he was weighing in generally about things he's seeing around the league from quarterbacks. And I thought it resonated with the Chicago audience in a lot of different ways. And here's the first thing that Kurt had to say in that regard.
Unbelievable athletic quarterbacks in our league that can make all kinds of plays and ad-lib plays. And we fall in love with that stuff. And I understand why, because there's only so many that can do it. But that's the thing that continually jumps out to me every week, is that it is very, very hard to live in that world. So if you want to try to live in that world, and if you're not able to see what's in front of you, and you're not able to take the layups and understand that you need the guys around you to make the game easier, you're always going to struggle, and it's going to be tough to win. And you might win a game or two, but you're not going to win a lot of games, and you're not going to be successful against the best teams in the league trying to do that. And so it's just, there was obviously certain, tapes that I watched or games that I watched where that jumped out more than others. But I think it's a natural general theme that I see week in and week out. And it's funny because, because we talk so much about the other, and I think people fall in love so much with the other stuff. Yet I see it every week that if you know how to play and see and do the things that you're supposed to do, that always is going to give you a better chance to win.
Notable, right? I mean, it's almost an extension of some of the conversation we had earlier in the week, talking about the quarterbacks who feel the position, and see the position as opposed to turning loose the athletic superpowers that we've seen. And then Kurt went on to follow up on his quarterback evaluation and used the one word that the coaching staff at Haugh has been using, and the one word that we've been using here at Take the North. And he started his next thought with the word consistency.
Consistency comes from seeing it, like knowing what you're supposed to do within your offense, knowing what you're seeing defensively, and then making the plays that are in front of you, letting the offense work for you, to me is the biggest key to consistency. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to have a good game. I mean, I played a lot of football and I played a lot of good football, but there were times that I would go into games and I'd just be going like, I'm just not seeing it as well today. Now, I knew that was my strength, so I knew I was going to see it well most of the time, but there were games that you just didn't see it as well, or there were games where the ball just wasn't coming out of your hand as well. So you're going to have those games, but to me, that's what it comes back to. The consistency of reading a play and getting it to the right guy, understanding when I need to get off a guy and get to the next guy and work through my progressions. If you do that consistently, along with obviously being talented enough to make the throws that you have to make, and you make those physically consistently, that to me is where it's at. That's where consistency comes from. And so when we talk about the best guys in the league, that's what they do, is they make the layups. They know where they're getting with the football, and then they always give you something special, right? They give you the Patrick Mahomes special plays, or Joe Burrow just making an unbelievable play on an anticipation or with his accuracy. But that's where it all starts. Even with those great players.
Do you think Kurt Warner, because he is terrific?
Yeah,
I'm glad we played that. Do you think Kurt Warner, when he talks about Justin Fields, unintentionally is almost like talking about him in the past tense as a Bears quarterback, or do you feel like he talks about him with there's still an opportunity here for him because these guys are so savvy and good that they stay away from declarations. But I just wonder if you're hearing something there that maybe,
Not a ton. I mean, I think I see opportunity, but I think I also see guidelines. I think I see like boxes that need to be checked, and it just harkens back to conversations we were having 12 and 13 months ago about not just assuming that a certain number of boxes is ultimately going to be checked until a quarterback gets out the Sharpie and puts his X in that box. It's not checked. And so, there are boxes on Justin's ledger that aren't checked, and he's going to have to spend the next 5 weeks trying to mark those in a way that changes the Bears mindset or convinces someone else around the league that he's worth riding with, and we'll see where it goes. But there's certainly some very specific, straightforward, easy to understand from Kurt quarterback guidelines there that should be a steering point for him.
So it seemed like it was big picture day at Haugh on Wednesday because from Justin Fields talking about what he's going through, and certainly the conversation about his future has been ongoing, just as it has been for Matt Eberflus. And Dan, to a lesser degree, maybe Matt Eberflus had a pretty good moment at the podium talking Wednesday, putting things in perspective, talking about what his mentors told him and the need for wins and losses. And I wondered this, and tell me again, you're in the room, I'm watching either on my computer or listening on the app. So you don't have that context, but do you think he did speak with a more relieved tone? And if he did, do you think it was because he was getting to be privy to something one way or another about his future?
No, I certainly didn't read either one of those things sitting there in that room. I think that if I'm being frank, we're in an awkward stage here because we have 5 weeks left in a regular season that could be headed for significant change when the off season arrives. Now, there's again a chance for, just as Justin has a chance, there's a chance for Matt to write the final chapter in a way that changes the direction of the sequel, right? Like, right. We'll see where it goes from here. But look, like I think over time in the 2 years that I've covered Matt Eberflus, there are certain topics that he is more eloquent and graceful in talking on. There are certain topics that gum him up and make him trip and stumble and create a very clumsy back and forth exchange. I think he was kind of in a series of questions asking him to do some personal reflection on the patience level he's needed to have. But I also think like we are, one Vikings play 11 days ago from talking about a 3-9 football team that pooped another game away.
I'll contrary, my friend. We are 2 plays away
from them being 6-6 and in the hunt, right?
Yeah,
all these different permutations.
Glass is half cracked. I have to say.
The reason I bring it up is because it's just like now all of a sudden, like we talked the other day, the door's open for them to run the table and get in the playoffs, and like you're in this weird middle ground in that room of trying to figure out where you're there 5 times a week, and the head coach talks to you on 4 of those, and so you're trying to figure out a way to get us to the point where bigger decisions are made.
Weighing every word with a scale, and that's you're parsing every sentence, and you're striving to find some meaning because as we have lived through before, all of a sudden the season's over and boom, things happen fast. And
you're allowing him to have his say also, right? Like, and share some perspective and thoughts, because if he is going to state a case for why he should be the Bears coach in 2024 and longer, like some of it will come through his words and more of it will come through his actions. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, how are you seeing this? How are you reacting to this? And now what's next?
So speaking of what's next, let's keep it away from the conceptual and the hypothetical, and let's get into your numbers game and get to our predictions. Let's start with the numbers game, Dan. Every week in the Chicago Tribune and chicagotribune.com, you have a package of numbers that help us understand better what to expect Sunday with the Bears and the Lions. Where do you want to start? A couple of examples?
I'll give you 3 to start. And the first one is 1,003, that 36-yard reception that DJ Moore had in Minnesota. Pushed him over the 1,000-yard milestone. He is now the 12th Chicago Bears receiver and the 13th Chicago Bear overall to reach the 1,000-yard milestone at least once in a season. Moore is 9th in the league in receiving yards. He's on pace for 1,421 receiving yards for the season, which would tie him for second on the Bears' all-time single-season chart with Alshon Jeffrey, who had that same total in 2013. The only player that would have had more than that, your guy, Brandon Marshall, 1,508 yards in 2012, the year before I got back.
DJ Moore, I think undoubtedly, it's hard to argue, is their MVP. He's had the best year. He's going to go to the Pro Bowl. I think that he should. You look at the numbers and what he means to this team it is reflected in the numbers, but also just a consummate teammate. He stepped up and said some nice things about Justin Fields and his growth, and he's been through a lot of young quarterbacks, so that chemistry does matter, so that's a good number. What's the next one?
No question about it. 7 is the next number, and that's the number of interceptions the Bears defense has had over the past 2 games. We all are aware of how quickly that faucet is open for the Bears defense. Those 7 picks in the last 2 games surpassed the total that the Bears had in the first 10 games, which was 6. 6 in the first 10, 7 in the last 2. It was the first time the Bears have had 7 interceptions in a 2-game period since early in the 2012 season. Again, a year before I got back on the beat. And that defense, as you would remember, because you would have been at this game, recorded 5 interceptions off Tony Romo on the Monday night stage in week 4 of 2012, and then 2 more the next week in a blowout of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
And I was at that game. I do remember it well. And this is the spot where we point out that a team that has 7 interceptions in its last 2 games is playing a quarterback that the last time he played a game at Soldier Field outdoors in December threw 4 picks for the LA Rams, who were shivering their way to a 15-6 loss against the 2018 Vic Fangio Bears defense. I don't know that Jared Goff will struggle to that degree again, but it is fun to remember that this is not somebody who's looking forward to playing in the cold. He's a California kid. This is where the whole mythical Bears weather may come into play, but you never know.
That was a true signature win for that division championship team for sure, because they dominated that football game defensively and took Jared Goff apart, and it made a stinker of a performance from Mitch Trubisky not matter because they so thoroughly dismantled Jared Goff. All right, my last number for you is 140. It's the number of receiving yards that Sam Laporta had in the Lions win last week over the New Orleans Saints. Laporta had 9 catches, those 140 yards. He had a 13-yard touchdown early. The Lions won, obviously, 33-28. Laporta is now on pace for 962 yards this season, which gets him in reach of becoming potentially the 3rd rookie tight end in NFL history to get to 1,000 yards in his first season. Most recently, Kyle Pitts did it with the Atlanta Falcons 2 years ago in a 17-game season. And the all-time rookie receiving record for tight ends in NFL history is Iron Mike Ditka, 1,076 yards, 14-game season, 1961.
Well played. That's a good one to use. Laporta's a problem, and I wonder how the Bear defense is going to be able to handle him specifically on 3rd down. This is the one thing that seems to be I can't quite grasp from a football perspective. I appreciate what the Bears have done defensively, how they're rushing the passer. They've improved under Eberflus. They're 9th overall in total defense. They're bad on 3rd down statistically. Those 2 things don't typically, all those things don't go together. If you're good on 3rd down, you're getting off the field, and that typically goes with the defense that's highly ranked in other categories. But Dan, that's an odd one, and Laporta could exploit that on Sunday if they're not careful.
No question. Andre Curtis, the Bears safeties coach, took the podium on Thursday and also talked about just how good Laporta is at using his body and bodying up defensive backs and linebackers and then using that leverage to break open. And Jared Goff has found a chemistry with that. It's a lot easier to have a chemistry with that, like that when you've got 2 really good running backs, a terrific number 1 receiver, an emerging second-year receiver in Jamison Williams and a couple supporting cast members. So they've got weapons that allow you to do a lot of things. And oh, by the way, as you mentioned, the last time the Bears played the Lions, that front, that offensive line that they bring to the table also makes things a lot easier for all those playmakers that we just mentioned.
Eddie Jackson, Jamison Williams, pretty good. So you might want to worry about him. So Jared Goff can't drop it in the bucket like he did last time. And as Adam Studzinski points out, last time the Bears did pretty well against Sam Laporta, 3 catches, 18 yards. You wonder what role the previous game plan will play in this attack, in this game for both sides. Ben Johnson, your guy, the offensive wizard that you want to see in Chicago, he's going to get a chance to look even more brilliant against Sunday against the Bears. I wondered, they played them just a few weeks ago. How much of that stuff carries over?
Well, what's interesting, I was leaving the locker room on Thursday. I was going to head back to the media room and start typing some things up. And then Jalen Johnson was coming back to the locker room. I said, I want to go talk to Jalen for a minute. So I reversed course and I talked to him a little bit about what they did successfully 3 weeks ago to make Jared Goff so uncomfortable. And Jalen sort of indicated that the Lions live in the soft middle of the field, and they're able to find openings there that Jared Goff does a terrific job of hitting passes in. And so the Bears made it an emphasis to take that away, and they did so successfully. And Jared Goff threw 3 interceptions, and they were never really in a rhythm until you got to the last 4 minutes of the game, and the Bears backed off, and in a 2-minute defense didn't necessarily play the same style of defense that they had been playing. Going to be really interesting to see if there is the chess match again and what adjustments are made on both sides, because if that is something that worked for the Bears in game 1 against the Lions, it'll be really interesting to monitor how much they do that successfully Sunday at Soldier Field.
That's good insight. That's interesting. All right, so let's get to our predictions, bringing in Adam Studzinski. This is one that around town, there's momentum growing for the Bears to pull off the upset. I think as we sit here this before the game, days before the kickoff, they're 3-point underdogs. Dave Wannstedt picked the Bears to win. There's other people who can see a pathway to victory. Adam, I wonder, are you picking the Bears to beat the Lions?
I am going to go ahead and pick the Bears again. I think did I say last time? I can't remember if I did. It'll be a cold day in hell before I pick the Lions in anything. I just refuse to do it. And I do legitimately think like the Bears do have a really good chance in this game, and there's going to be some so what I'm looking for here, some carryover from the last time that they played. I think the Lions might be the Lions have every motivation to play better too. So I don't expect the Bears to dominate the game for 55 minutes like they did last time, but I got the Bears winning 27-23. Mainly and I do expect the Bears to be able to score. And not only did they do it last time, but the Lions defense has been
leaky,
bad.
leaky.
It's been bad. And you've started to see, I mean, they probably should have lost 2 out of their last 3 games. If you got the Bears game, and then if Derek Carr doesn't get hurt against the Saints, who knows what happens at the end of that game.
I know.
So yeah. So anyway, I am picking the Bears, and I want to say that 2018 game that you guys mentioned, the Bears-Lions game, the Bears-Rams game, I went to that game. It's the only game I went to that year. And I was sitting in I think it was the north end zone. It's the only end zone that any action happened in. It's where the safety was. It's where the Bears' only touchdown was. And it was incredible. It is one of the best things I've ever experienced. And it is...
The touchdown was Santa's sleigh, wasn't it?
I think it was. Yeah. To the offensive lineman whose name I can't remember
Bradley
right now.
Sowell.
That's
Bradley
it.
Sowell.
Thank you.
Wow.
And so anyway,
good.
I bring that up because you're talking about the defensive performance. Like, I still believe that is the best I've ever seen a Bears defense play, and I wasn't alive in '85, so that doesn't count. I personally have never seen a Bears defense play like that. Like, that was a complete dismantling of the best offense in football. Like, it was unbelievable. So anyway, I just had to say that. And Bears beating the Lions this weekend. There we go.
Good job. That's a good memory too, because that team, I remember that night, and I remember how they made Jared Goff look, and their offense seemed pedestrian. I know it was cold, but I felt like when I left Soldier Field that night, I wondered, could this team really get to the Super Bowl? I mean, that's how good you thought that defense played. And I know they only scored 15 points, but I thought, could Vic Fangio be that smart where this team's going to the Super Bowl?
That's it. I mean, there was so much talk in that like 4 or 5 week span from the defensive players about just how much of a mastermind that Vic Fangio had become for them, and in giving them really simple ways to be very dominant against whoever they played. And so don't forget the Patriots ended up using that exact game plan against the Rams in the Super Bowl.
I was just going to say that they took the front that the Bears used and just copy and pasted it and took them apart. So
no question.
Yeah.
So Studs picks the Bears. What say you, Dan?
I agree with Studs. I've got Bears 24, Lions 23. It's now or never time, in my opinion. I think the Bears really, really controlled that football game 3 weeks ago at Ford Field, and they are well aware of how they let that thing get away and are capable of compensating for that. They also get the Lions on a slower track on a colder day outside at their field, and I think it's going to be enough for them to pull off an upset. And really, like I say, when it's now or never time, this is your chance to put a signature win on the resume. It's now or never. And so I think they're up to the challenge this weekend.
I like the optimism, and both of your logic is sound. I think I still get back to the fact that the Lions haven't played well. It's almost like reverse logic. So they're gonna flip a switch because they know they have to start playing well, or else they're gonna be the easiest team to eliminate once the playoffs begin. I think they're gonna be well coached, they're gonna be well prepared, and they're gonna come in with a little bit more explosiveness than the Bears have, and that's gonna be the difference in a close game. 24-20 Lions. I hope I'm wrong. I think there could be a defense. I think there could be a defensive touchdown. That would be a big factor in the game. And if it's the Bears, great. But I don't know. There's just, it seems like it's going to be one of those games. I hope it is entertaining because of the elements in some way. Because Jared Goff, the first time he blows on his hands, I think people are going to say, "Oh, see, California kid, he's soft." And then he's going to throw. He could throw you the ball. So if the Bears score on defense, let me say this: 24-20 Lions will win. If the Bears score on defense, though, they win.
Okay.
So I'm an asterisk.
Good little twist there. I like it.
If Jalen Johnson can catch the pick six this time, they will win. How about that?
I love it.
Good stuff, studs. All right, let's wrap things up with our 2-minute drill.
The 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill.
Dan, it's easy to overlook the Bears' running game, but I think that could be one of their strengths, and certainly could be part of their method of beating the Lions. D'Onta Foreman will be able to play this week. He was a positive update. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, no question. They're as healthy as they've been since the season opened, so I would fully expect that. The other part of this is the offensive line, left to right, is going to be intact for the third consecutive game. The Bears have only had the same offensive line start 3 consecutive games in the Matt Eberflus era once before. It was in the end of last season, in the late November, early December chunk of things. And so that continuity up front, with that group now playing better together and playing healthier, should be an advantage for the Bears offense as they push forward.
The score reported on the Parkinson Spiegel show and other outlets followed in confirmation on Wednesday that the Bears have scouted land in the South Lot, that they as a potential building site for the next football stadium. It's that close to Soldier Field. We know where the South Lot is. I have toured it with George McCaskey. I wonder what George would do in those games, in those cases. But what did you make of that report? I looked at it as due diligence and leverage possibilities, Dan.
I look at all these like that at this point, David. I kind of shrug at a lot of things until we hear anything with concrete thought behind it, and literally and figuratively, right? Like I think that there are many logistical questions that need to be asked about how you could possibly build a stadium there and continue playing at the one you're in simultaneously, and like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So I don't know, like all this stuff is in such an exploratory phase for this team. And the first chance we get to hear from Kevin Warren when the season ends, he's better make himself available for a long, long time, because I think he's got a lot of questions to answer on a number of topics that are very relevant.
Lions injury report included Frank Ragnow, limited. Looks like he could be missing another game. What do you think that would have on the effect of their ability to run the ball and protect the passer?
No, I mean, it's a deal, and I think the Lee McNeil injured reserve move earlier in the week is another one that hurts them on the defensive line. And so look, like the Lions have made their way up the NFL ladder with strength in the trenches, and particularly on the offensive line. And so Ragnow's absence is certainly notable.
And finally, you wanted to follow up with some Kevin Warren thoughts, because I think that it's a worthwhile thing to keep an eye on. I think Kevin Warren is somebody whose role in the offseason remains to be determined, is kind of vague, but I think we both sense it's going to be he's going to be impactful. Mark Gannis from Sports Core was on the Mully and Haugh show on Thursday morning and said that the first thing Kevin Warren has to do, besides some of these stadium questions, is fix the football side. And he will be involved in fixing the football side. I thought that was a very strong comment by somebody who's in a position to know and works in these circles, Mark Gannis. I don't think it probably surprised you, Dan, to hear somebody like that say that.
No, and I'll try to set up a couple quick audio clips for us just so that people can hear Kevin's voice on this matter. And these are things that were taken from interviews I did with Kevin when I wrote that big profile on him before training camp started. And the last interview I did with him was on June 30th, just to timestamp it for everyone. And a big center of that conversation was about his oversight of Ryan Poles and what he thought of Ryan and how he was expecting to lead and evaluate Ryan. And so when I tell you on this podcast that I am working with my own educated guess assumption that Ryan will still be in that role, it's just a guess based primarily on the conversations that Kevin and I had before all this started. This is well before the Bears were 4-8. It was well before they had turmoil inside the building. It was well before the season started. But I will let you hear with your own ears some of the things that Kevin expressed about Ryan, and then you can hear Kevin's voice and tell me what you interpret. The first clip we'll play is just kind of the sentiments that Kevin had in terms of the strong, immediate bond he had with Ryan as they were setting a vision for the football team.
This is the first time I've been in a relationship like this, and I just want to be his sunshine, his water, just for his continued growth. He's outstanding, and every person in their career who has achieved any level of success has had that person at a critical time in their career that was there, that was honest, that was demanding, but that was supportive, and truly, that you could truly, when I can honestly say, even though we've worked together for a little bit of time, we've worked together for a relatively short period, but it really started in January because we were doing all the transition meetings. But it's one of those ones, kind of how, like with my wife Greta, I was able to call my mom after the first date and said, I found my wife. I was able to go home with Greta and tell her after my first meeting with Ryan, I found my work partner. And I've had that really 2 times in my life, in May, and I had it in Coach Vermeil. And when you have that special relationship, that you can, we're businessmen, we're both type A people, we know about accountability and we're going to be judged by the performance on it, but to have someone that you work with. So when people ask me, just like Greta said, she hasn't seen me this happy and, joyful. I'm grateful to have that environment. Ryan and I can talk about anything, deal with any issues. We will not agree on everything, but to have that relationship, this is a really special environment.
David May, who he mentioned there, is May Davis, his executive assistant, who he's worked off and on with for 33 years during 6 different stops in his career journey, starting with law firms all the way through the Big Ten and the NFL. And then obviously Dick Vermeil, who he considers a mentor. The last clip we'll play from Kevin is just a follow-up, was just asking him about his evaluation of Ryan as he went into this with the oversight of the general manager. And I think it'll allow you to, again, hear in Kevin's voice the things that he went into this season looking to assess Ryan on. Here's that exchange.
Part of your responsibility with Ryan will be evaluating him as well in performance reviews, in addition to just straight up wins and losses and success. What are the things that you kind of put as your barometer for that job?
Yeah, I mean, the things I look at that are, work ethic, organization skills, leadership skills of his department, communication skills, decision-making process under stress, wisdom, vision, foresight, desire to win, passion, commitment to excellence, and all of those different things are important. And I know one area I can continually help Ryan on. Just continually be there as a resource is he's so bright, he's so focused, he's so determined to be successful that he has to make sure that he knows that this is an ultra marathon. Beyond even in marathon.
Right.
It's an ultra marathon. and he has to do that. So he needs to make sure he takes care of himself.
Yeah.
Dan, when was that interview?
June 30th.
Boy, I tell you, context is everything. And if you were to play those comments, and as this conversation keeps going, we'll get out of here in a moment, but then we're going to come back to this at some point. When you hear Kevin Warren 6 months ago talk about being the sunshine and the water to Ryan Poles' growth as an executive, and then when you hear him in the next breath, and I know this was a longer interview, but then in the next breath talk about him needing to realize this is the ultra marathon, it removes to me any doubt that Ryan Poles is coming back. He's definitely coming back. He's definitely the guy that Kevin Warren made a quick decision and determination that he is the guy that can build the Bears into a Super Bowl champion in his ambitious mind. And he's going to help him by doing whatever he asks, but whatever he needs to make that happen. That's pretty powerful stuff when you hear it 6 months later. When you hear in July, it sounds very, I think what you think you should hear, and they get along very well quickly. But when you hear it, when you're considering all these future things that we're considering, it hits a little different.
The NFL is a weird place. Things happen, relationships fray, wild twists and turns that we never saw coming happen. But if you listen to those sentiments and you hear the conviction in Kevin's voice and the sincerity with which he praises Ryan Poles, if he were to turn around on January 10th and fire Ryan Poles, he would have, from me alone, 45 questions about how credible his thoughts are on the people that he's leading, right?
And Dan, it's out of character based on his career. I mean, he's not a flip flopper, right? In terms of believing in people, not that we know of. You're right, but yeah, you would have a right to have those questions.
Yeah. So I just thought it would be interesting to play that for our audience, and they can go from there. So that look, like this is the storyline for the next 5-6 weeks, and it gives some valuable subtext, I think.
Big picture stuff. We'll zoom in a little tighter on Sundays with the Bears and the Lions. Noon at Soldier Field. We'll be here on your free Odyssey app with a post-game podcast reaction to whatever happens on the lakefront. We'll be back on Tuesday morning with an episode looking ahead to the next game and the next opponent. Who do they play?
Cleveland. I got to go to Cleveland. One last tease for readers of my weekly storylines package. One of my favorite storylines of the year will be on ChicagoTribune.com on Friday. There are currently 4 members of the Chicago Bears team that have college programs in the college football playoff. You have Deontay Foreman and Roshan Johnson representing Texas. You have Eddie Jackson representing Alabama. You have Kyler Gordon representing Washington. And the reason this is fun is because DeMarcus Walker represents Florida State. And DeMarcus was none too happy with the decision that was made to leave Florida State out of the playoffs, nor the way he got that news, which was from a less than friendly call from Eddie Jackson to tell him that Alabama had jumped over Florida State.
That's a good tease. They have anybody from Michigan?
Nobody from Michigan. No.
That's going to be really awkward when Harbaugh walks into the room in January. Where are the Michigan men? All right,
I don't know.
That's another pod. All right, that'll wrap it up. That was a good one, especially the Kevin Warren stuff. Very interesting stuff. You can get us on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us on 670 The Score's YouTube page, and you'll be back Sunday night for our reaction to the Bears and Lions. For Adam Studzinski, who picked the Bears again. For Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.